Hi, everyone. We will be starting in about 2 minutes. Thank you for joining today. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to From Visibility to Assurance, What's New in Apstra and Data Center Assurance. My name is Nisha Munshi, and I'm a part of Customer Success Strategy and Experience Design team here at HP Networking. I will be your host for today's session. I'm joined today by Kyle Baxter, who's the Director of Product Management at HP Networking. He will be walking us through latest innovations in HP Networking Apstra Data Center Director and HP Mist Networking Data Center Assurance. In this session, you'll learn about new capabilities designed to improve data center visibility, validation, reliability, and operational efficiency. We'll be answering questions throughout the webinar, just so you know, and we'll leave some time for the questions at the end as well. So please use the Q&A tab that you see on your screens to ask them while we go through the webinar. With that, let's get started. Over to you, Kyle.
Thank you, Disha. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session. So as mentioned, my name is Kyle Baxter. I lead our product management team for our Apstra Data Center Director and Data Center Assurance Solutions. So indeed, today we're going to walk through some exciting new innovations that we are bringing, starting with looking at what is HP's self-driving vision? What are the challenges that we are working to solve for users like yourself? How are we unique? And then we'll actually get in and see a few demos and the different stages of self-driving. And then we'll get into the second half where we'll talk a little bit about integrations. Because while being in the networking side, we like to think that the networking is the most important part of the data center, but indeed it's your applications and workloads that you are hosting in your data center that is the most important part. And so we'll talk about some integrations we have that bring a complete full stack data center solution beyond just networking. And then we'll get towards the end where we'll talk a little bit about some of the future plans that we are building and how we are bringing new innovations to you. And then we'll wrap up with a little call to action, and hopefully we'll leave some time for some live Q&A. But as mentioned, please ask your questions in the Q&A panel. We have our experts on that can help answer questions as they come up as we go through the session. But before we get going, I have a little poll question that just kind of want to start with and get some feedback on the audience on who is actually using and has Apstra deployed managing their data center today, and who is not yet having it, but looking at it and interested in what we're going to be talking about today. So if you can vote, there should be a poll popping up on your screen on the Zoom share that you can be able to see and vote on, and we can see where you are in your stage. So with that, let's get started. So where we focus as HP networking team on where we look at is we focus on how do we get to the operational challenges and outcomes. And what we see when we talk to users is challenges usually get lumped into three different categories. The first one is around speed, on how do you deploy and make changes in your network that meet your business needs. And you might be stuck on looking at manual or half automated types of solutions that don't give you the speed you need. And those then lead into the second category of reliability. To me, speed and reliability go hand in hand, and we'll see that a lot as we go through the session today on how we bring those together. Because without reliability, you can't have speed, because all you'd be doing is pushing potential outages faster. So you need that reliability to be able to bring speed and deploy new services. And then the last category we see is lack of insight into what is going on in their network and how the network and the applications and workloads are linked and working together. Usually we see there's either separate teams that are looking at the network versus applications or separate tools where you're having to look and swivel chair between tools to understand what is actually going on in your network and applications. So with that, we are building a vision to get to what we call self-driving networks. Because our ultimate goal is the network gets out of the way of you operating and growing your business, and you can focus on what does your business need and how do you manage that, and not the day-to-day slogging through the operations of the network. And just like in a self-driving car, there is multiple stages of what we call self-driving networks. And what we'll do is we'll walk through these different stages from data to insights to recommendations to the level of assistance, and then finally into self-driving. We'll walk you through and show you some of the latest innovations we are bringing and delivering for users like yourself. And to start with, how we handle and how we conquer complexity in data centers is we start with a core foundation of Apstra and our data center director. So I think many of you are using Apstra. I think I saw 60, 70% of users on are actually using Apstra, so you are aware of that. For those that aren't, Apstra is our core fabric management that is intent-based, and it provides context and information about the network. And we'll talk a lot about why that is unique and why that differentiates and adds value to users like yourself. But recently, we've combined Apstra with Mist. We've taken Mist from a solution for campus and branch with wire and wireless assurance, and we brought data center assurance using the Mist and Marvis AI. And we'll see a lot about how this combination provides unique value and helps provide and deliver on those outcomes that we talked about from speed, reliability, and insights. So how it does it is Apstra, as I mentioned, is intent-based. So intent meaning you're defining your intended outcomes, not the specific line-by-line CLI configuration, but your intended outcomes. How many racks do you want? How many servers do you need to host your workloads? What kind of speed connections do you need? Do you need multi-tenancy and segregation? Do you need separation between different apps and users? That kind of defined outcomes. Apstra then knows that defined outcomes and then can monitor and collect data from the switches and can compare that to your intended outcome. So we're not just collecting raw data and then displaying it to you and hoping it makes sense, but we're collecting data and correlating against your intended outcomes. So when you look at things like BGP sessions, you're not just saying, hey, you have 10 BGP sessions. It's actually you were supposed to have 12. So you have 2 that are down, and actually one of them is incorrectly configured and is missing data. So we can be able to provide that context that when we then start layering in AI to it, as we've all used different versions of AI, the better the data that AI has, the better the results you have. And that is where we differentiate, is we start with a core strong foundation of contextualized data that when we start applying AI ops to it for AI operations, we have a very strong foundation that we can jump very quickly, very fast into impacts that you can have from things like predictions to root cause to looking at your applications and understanding how they correlate to your network. And we'll see all that in action today as we get into the different new capabilities that we've launched and delivered. And so what this allows us to do is, with those two combinations of contextualized data and adding agentic AI apps together, it provides solutions to provide better outcomes for you as users and operators of your networks to be able to have the right insights so that way you know exactly what's going on in your network, how your applications are connected and interacted and using your network, so you can troubleshoot faster, you can find the root cause, and you can make the network not the bottleneck, but part of the business and how you want to grow. And then we can bring that speed and reliability and bring that together because we have the right insights and reliability that you know that we can eliminate human errors by providing workflows to add new racks, add new virtual networks, add new services that eliminate human errors and can allow you to deploy services faster. And our users are able to get to the point where they can eliminate the need of maintenance windows and outages because they can trust that the system will work. They have the right visibility, the right reliability, that they know they can deploy new services quickly and rapidly, and it's going to work the first time. And we got recognized by Gartner for all of this work. So early last year, Gartner put out a Magic Quadrant. If you hadn't seen it, we got scored at the very top. We were the #1 deployment vendor in enterprise data center buildouts. So this was before Juniper became part of HPE, hence why it says Juniper there, not HPE. But we've even accelerated even faster, and we'll see that later on some of the integrations where we brought integrations into the complete stack of data center beyond just networking. So let's get into a little bit on how we deliver this better outcome and what does the architecture look like. So it starts at the core foundation with Apstra and our data center director, which provides the ability for you to design your network before your hardware arrives. So you can fully design what is your network going to look like, what is all your IP and ASNs and connections and all that going to look like, your cabling map, everything. So that way when the hardware does arrive, you're ready to deploy it instantly and get it up and running as fast as possible. So that way you're not waiting on hardware to start designing. You can design it up front. You can then continue your day-to-day operations for as you expand and grow for, say, adding new racks, deploying new virtual networks to host new services. All that is done through Apstra. And then, as I mentioned, it collects rich telemetry to be able to understand how your network is operating and is it operating as you intended. Now, what we've done over the last couple of years is we've now expanded and integrated Apstra to be connected to the Mist AI native platform. So many of you probably have used or heard of Mist. You probably think of it as a solution for campus and branch with wired and wireless assurance. But what we've done is we've turned Mist from a product to a platform. And so now we can extend Mist beyond wired and wireless assurance, and we've integrated it into other parts of our networking portfolio. And starting with what we're going to talk about today with data center assurance. And so what we'll see some of the capabilities, and you'll recognize various different things that are common across, but there's some unique things we'll talk about in a data center, because a data center isn't looking at wireless radio frequencies. We're looking at applications and how they're connected and how they're interacting in more east-west types of traffic patterns. And so we'll look through and we'll start diving into these new features on how we're providing AI-powered insights and supercharging that data that we have in our core Apstra data center director. So let's get into there. So I'm going to go through the different stages. If you remember from the beginning when I talked about that vision to self-driving and the different stages we have, we're going to go through each stage from the right data to the right insights to the right recommendations to looking then at how do we get into self-driving. So we'll go through each stage and step. And starting with data collection, because as I mentioned at the beginning, AI only provides value when it has the right data and the right insights on that data. Otherwise, as we've all experienced and seen, it hallucinates very confidently, but it hallucinates and provides incorrect results and answers. And so we have the right foundation that we have with Apstra, where we collect the right telemetry. We have multiple predefined probes that work out of the box. We have the ability to provide custom probes for collecting additional data if you have unique requirements with no coding capabilities required. And then we take that telemetry and we put it into our intent-based analytics or IBA pipeline. And this is where we really differentiate is we're not taking just raw telemetry, but we're comparing it against your intended design. So things like are sessions supposed to be there, supposed to be up, to routes, things that can be very hard to troubleshoot if all you're looking at is raw data. We can be able to quickly compare that and say, yep, you have the right routes, the right sessions, the right links, all of that is working as expected. Or if it's not, flag that immediately and flag what is deviated from your intended design. We've also a couple years ago expanded telemetry to get into flow data. And so this is application related flow data, things like SFlow, NetFlow, IPFix, IFA, that can be really powerful in understanding how is your network being utilized. It's not just looking at, how many packets and our sessions up, but looking at the application related data inside those packets and understanding who is talking to who, how are they talking, what is the path through the network, so you can truly understand your network utilization. And we model all of this in a graph database. If you haven't heard of a graph database, it's a relationship database. So think about something like a social network where it looks at how people are connected and interconnected and how they're related. In a graph database, we do the same thing, but for a networking context. So we know how every switch, every link, every session, every route, everything in the network, how it's related, how it's interconnected, and how it should be working and related to each other so we can be able to provide that information. And when you start looking at then adding AI insights to it, that graph database becomes absolutely key in a foundation of providing the right data with the right context. Now, I'm going to take a little poll break again here and kind of get some feedback from the group on what kind of tools do you use for observability and insights today? And do you use vendor exclusive tools for your solutions? Do you have some custom in-house developed tools and observability platforms? Do you leverage third-party observability tools? Use some of all of the above, some combination of that? Or hopefully there's not many of you that say nothing today. I'll be a little bit worried if we have a bunch of people saying, yeah, we just run our network on hopes and dreams and don't have any observability or insights into it. But vote on where you are today, where you are in your journey, and then we'll see where people are at and as we get into further capabilities. So make sure you vote there, and let's talk about what do we provide as our insights. So yeah, it looks like, as I expected, most of you, it looks like 50% were using some combination of all the above from vendor, custom, third-party tools. A few of you do have nothing today. Feel bad for you. Hopefully we can convince you to start using some of the capabilities we're going to talk about today to get you something. But let's talk about what we provide for insights and observability beyond what we talked about with the right data and the right contextual information. When we start layering in the Mist AIOps capabilities for additional insights on that raw data. So let's look at that. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Marvis Actions. So for those of you that have used Mist, you're familiar with Marvis Actions. It's a way to categorize different events that are key actionable events that you need to go take an action on, and helps give you a first recommended action that you need to go take. And so it takes the information that we get from Apstra, and just like we were talking about BGP sessions earlier, here it's categorizing that, hey, you have this BGP session that's down that should be up on a specific Leaf device, and gives you that visibility and insights onto what it is in a quick view. So think of Marvis Actions as a kind of a starting point, coffee cup kind of morning view where you can see, hey, what are top actionable events going on in my network that I need to make sure the team is addressing? Now, building on that, we have SLEs or service level expectations. And so these are viewing of actual score of your health and looking at how is your network actually operating. So again, it's taking the same kind of data we were just talking about from anomalies that have been detected in the network and categorizing them into different categories from link, system, fabric, virtual, service, health, and being able to categorize, hey, what is contributing to poor network experience for my applications? And what devices are these happening? What applications and services are potentially impacted? If there is things like link issues or system issues or fabric-wide issues that are contributing to poor experiences. Now, a unique one I want to talk about that if you've used Mist before, you've never seen this is application awareness. As I mentioned earlier, in a data center, we're not looking at wireless radio frequencies, but we're looking at applications and east-west types of traffic. And so where this helps is that visibility disconnect we see in a lot of our users. So we see people that have either separate teams or separate apps they're looking at, from infrastructure network monitoring to application monitoring. And then when things go wrong or they're trying to figure out how their network is serving those applications, they're having to correlate between two different tools, or worse, even two different teams, to understand, when something goes wrong, what services are down, how do we get it up? Are we actually losing business revenue because of this? And so what we've built here is we've taken the topology information we have, we've taken the flow data information we have, and we've been able to map that end to end across your entire network. And so here's a sample view of looking at a couple of different application services and clients on the top row, to then how those are connected and traffic patterns are flowing through our network and where they're going. And so how we build this is we start with the topology graph that you've designed in your intended design within Apstra. We've taken the flow data that gets things like how are your applications and how is the network actually being used, and we've combined that together to provide a complete end-to-end view and looking at the complete flow path and service topology, and bring that into what we call application awareness, where you can then even dig down into a specific application service, which when I mean by application service, I'm looking at a specific IP and port. So in this case, we're looking at a service that pie chart that is at TCP port 9009, so a specific application service that's running, and it is connected to a specific client, or client is connected to that using that. You can see that 1080.110.150 IP address that's connected to that specific service application, and the path that those communications are taking through the network, the interfaces being used, the traffic volume being leveraged, the traffic paths in this case, so we can map the complete end-to-end view of how your applications are using the network and what is going on. And this is a key mapping that we build, and then we'll build upon this as we go down the further stages of our product and see how we build upon this even more. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about another area of insights we provide around sustainability. And so this is looking at your actual power and energy consumption. And so you can input your existing power cost for your region. So how many cents per kilowatt does your region have? And you can be able to get information and get visibility, as you see there in the top row, on your power usage and energy consumption and cost. And we've even been able to start giving recommendations on how you can potentially save energy by saying shutting down unused ports or low traffic ports to be able to leverage power savings. In this case, why 1800 doesn't seem like a lot, the power cost, if you got that in the first part, was a little over 7,000. So it's actually a almost 25% savings by looking at some of the recommendations on turning off unused ports and parts of the network. So that finishes up the insights section. So I want to kind of move into recommendations on how we take some of those insights especially around the application awareness, and how we turn those into recommendations. And so starting with the first feature I want to talk about, impact analysis. And so the idea and goal that we went about to achieve here is when things go wrong in the network, how do you know what is the root cause and what is actually impacted? And so what we've done is we've built around that foundation that we talked about with application awareness, where we mapped your applications to your network, and we've added in the anomalies that Apstra has detected from deviations from your intended design and mapped that and provided impact computation and additional analysis from our graph database that we talked about in the beginning, to adding in then root cause analysis knowledge cards that provide detailed analysis and information that can help correlate what are the root causes, what are impacted. And so what this looks like from a user perspective is you can see what is the key anomaly and what is the symptom anomalies. And what I mean here is, as we've all seen, when something goes wrong in the network, we get flooded with events and alerts. But usually there's only a couple of key things we need to look at, and the rest are all symptoms. And so in this case, we're looking at a cabling or link problem, and symptom events here are things like BGP and routes that have gone down or missing because a link is having problems. So you can ignore and not have to sit there and troubleshoot, why do I have routes that are missing, BGP sessions that are down that should be up, but you can focus on the cable and link problem as the key anomaly to go address and fix. And even more than that, we can be able to take that application awareness mapping that we talked about already and map, because we know what's running on these links and services because of the data we have. We know when something goes wrong, what are potentially impacted clients and services that were running on that. And so we can be able to see, was there a critical business-oriented service that we had that was running on there that is impacted, that users are now going to be calling about, and execs are going to be picking up the phone saying, hey, fix this ASAP. You could know about this ahead of time and be able to look at, oh, yep, we impacted some critical service. Let's figure out how we can mitigate that, reroute, or fix this issue to keep our business operating as we need and expect. Now, next I want to talk about is Marvis Minis. So for those of you that have used Mist, have heard and seen Marvis Minis, what it is an ability to provide synthetic network test. So how do you simulate things like applications and network connectivity test? And what we're looking at here is a dashboard for Marvis Minis on history of tests that are run, on how many passed, how many failed. In this case, fortunately, all of them have passed. But we can be able to see a history and know when was our network operating as expected. So what's unique about the data center, as we mentioned, is the applications. And so the configuration for Marvis Minis is looking at two different kinds of connectivity test: service connectivity or fabric connectivity. Service connectivity is simulating what an application connectivity would look like. So you're looking at, what virtual network do I want to use? What source destination IPs do I want it to be? Not necessarily what actual leaf devices or switches does it working on, but looking at point-to-point service connectivity checks. So if there is those critical workloads you want to ensure are always working, or be able to run and check connectivity tests without asking the app team to say, hey, does your app actually work as expected? You can be able to look at this and leverage Marvis Minis to ensure that connectivity. And then same thing on the fabric side, being able to do point-to-point connectivity checks between leaf devices. You can be able to schedule those and then not have to always fire up a CLI terminal session on devices and running ping test. We can do that natively here in the product, schedule them and show you results and show you history of results. That way you can always see that critical paths and critical services always have that connectivity. Now, moving in up the stack and getting to where I think, the most excited into what we're doing on next levels of assistance, because we've seen some great insights and data we have, able to root cause events, show what's impacted, ensure critical services are always working. But this is where it really gets even more exciting in my view, and where I get really excited about what the team's been able to deliver, is how we're delivering the next level of assistance to network operators. And so the first one I want to talk about is predictions. And so the goal that we set out when we started this journey for predictions is look at how do we change network operators from operating in a reactive mode to a proactive mode? And how do you see problems before they cause outages and reduce those downtimes? And so there's two prediction models that we've developed and have live today and are available now. And so the first one is system health, and the second one is optical assurance. So system health is things like CPU and memory on the physical switches. And this is looking at short-term forecast on is there things like CPU spikes or memory leaks that could cause potential issues on the switch to cause services or even the whole system to reboot and cause packet drops. Optical assurance, we're looking at trends around optics and more long-term trends of slow degradation of optics. We've seen users at large scales where they have thousands of optics, where they could be having one or two or more optics failing every single day. And it's like a game of whack-a-mole where they're trying to fix one optic and then the next one and trying to keep up with it. Where the value here is being able to see ahead of time if there's trends for things like temperature or power or voltage, or things like forward error correction, bit error rates, and CRC errors that are starting to show trends that, hey, this optic cable is beginning to degrade. We can look at that and see that and understand the trends and be able to help you prevent and reduce downtimes to be able to say, hey, we see the optic is degrading. Let's go ahead and open an RMA case to get a new one and schedule somebody to go out and replace it. So how this looks in real time, and I'll show a little quick demo here, is starting with a visibility chart here that we call a bubble chart. And it's a multi-dimensional view where the size of the bubble is the expected impact and severity. The y-axis is the confidence in the model, and the x-axis is the time to event. So what this allows you to focus on is look at the big bubbles in the top left that are high impact, high confidence, imminent to happen. Those are the ones you need to focus on versus a small bubble in the low right is low confidence, long time to happen, maybe low impact. But what we can do is see here quickly what are the problems in those optics. In this case, it was an optical transceiver. What is the impact and on services, and then get into the data on why we made this prediction. So that way you have the confidence that we're just not making random predictions, but we're actually looking at a trend where the power is beginning to start to oscillate and indicate that there is issues that this optic is beginning to degrade. And then we can even ask our Marvis AI assistant to be able to go ahead and proactively open an RMA support case on this with all of this information collected, packaged up, and automatically created in a support case. So you're not then having to go dig up, find all that information, collect it, go back and forth with support on, well, need this information, oh, that information, we need this to process the RMA, that. We collect all the right information and automate the support case for you and can get that going immediately. And so on these predictions, we start with a universal model. And so this is where we're taking the history that we have as a networking vendor for years and looking at universal anonymized data across all of the deployments and users we have as a baseline, and think of this as your kind of your general doctor. So this is your general recommendation on, hey, these are the trends and thresholds that we see for things like CPU and memory on a switch, or power, voltage, temperature, all those things on an optic that we can be able to recommend as, hey, these are the known thresholds. But then we can also look at your specific data and have site-specific model improvements that we can look at to say, oh, for your environment, you seem to be running a little hot in this specific metric, but that's a norm for your site that's a little different than everybody else. And so we can train and understand on that and continuously train, because our models are continuously updating and training in real time. And so we can be able to update on site-specific information for your specific environment to look at better accuracy and model specifics for your environments. This is like a specialist that dives into your specific environment and can train on your specific use case and data. So that's predictions. The next one I want to move into is we saw it there a little bit in the predictions demo is our agentic AI with our Marvis AI assistant. And so what we've done here is able to take user input in human readable text, take that into our AI assistant engine, leverage the agentic AI capabilities of Marvis, and look across multiple data sources from network data in the infrastructure to application data to our rich history of support cases where we've seen all sorts of issues over the multiple years of our networking history, to public documentation, knowledge-based articles, to product APIs where we can query things like the graph database we talked about in the beginning to get additional context and information. And so what this looks like is a user starts with a question. Could be something as basic as, why is my fabric unhealthy? Or do I have any issues? And it goes through and runs through different scenarios and looks at querying different spots and sees, oh, it looks like you got some anomalies here. Let me check states of different sessions. Let me do some additional investigation, run some additional commands, pull some additional data, look at telemetry and errors, correlate that all together, and be able to detect a root cause. And so it can follow a chain of evidence and look at things of, hey, we've seen BGP sessions and interfaces flapping, but we also see some errors on an optic and the temperature that's rising. So that could be an indication that, yep, that optic is beginning to degrade and it's starting to cause links to flap, which cause sessions to go down and application issues in connecting. And so we can identify that root cause across all sorts of data. So think of this as a network assistant troubleshooting just like you would, but in real time and based on what you're asking it to do. So let's look at a little quick demo here. And so I'm actually going to start in the campus wired and wireless side with a use case of users reporting issues of an application. And so this can show the complete view of where we're looking at, hey, there's no issues Marvis has detected in the wireless and wired network on the campus, but the data center, we've detected some issues, and we've seen some reachability issues of a specific app that is because causing issues. And so we see these trends, and so we can dive into the data center view specifically and see with Marvis actions that, yep, indeed, we see some BGP sessions flapping and some optic problems. Let's ask Marvis now to troubleshoot deeper. And so we can ask it that, hey, we're getting users report on a specific app and it's an intermittent problem. Help me figure out what's going on. And it can immediately identify that where that app is located in the network, what switches and links it's running over, and that, yeah, indeed, there is sessions that are flapping. And would you like me to dig further? Of course we would. So let's dig in deeper and we can be able to look through additional information. It's starting to look through errors on the optic transceivers. It's running additional commands, collecting additional data, looking at trends and seeing things that are degrading or increasing over time and that are changing that could be causing those links to flap. So we can ask it to provide us a root cause analysis of the issue, and it can be able to look at what's going on, why has those sessions and links been flapping, and what is the ultimate root cause. And it's that optical transceiver that is beginning to degrade and fail. And as we see before, we can open up a support case and it can get that immediately filed and automated and collect all the right information and get that going immediately. So that way we can get that issue fixed and get on with our business. So super powerful from a troubleshooting perspective to be able to interact and leverage and allow Marvis to use its tools and capabilities to help troubleshoot with you and for you through your network and through the issues that you're having. So getting to the final stage here of self-driving. So what I want to talk about is everything I've shown so far is available now and live in production. So everything we saw from application awareness to Marvis minis to SLEs to impact analysis to the predictions and even the Marvis AI assistant that we just saw from a troubleshooting perspective, all of that is available and live now. So that's where we're at today. And so I'll kind of tease a little bit and we'll talk more about where we're going in the future. But where we're going is starting to, now that we can identify what's the root cause and what's recommended guidance to solve issues, how do we go about actually automating those solutions? And that's what we're actively building right now. So how do we look at automatically resolving things like optic problems that we've seen, to links that are flapping, to issues with applications? Those are the areas that we are actively working on right now. And we'll get into a few more details on that in just a second. But let's take a little poll break here again, just to break up the session here. And I want to understand, how important is it for you, your leadership, your CEO, your board, whoever it is that you're working and reporting for, is agentic AI operations to your business objectives? Is it something your business is looking at as, hey, that's a critical mandatory requirement we have to have now, and that we see the value and we know we need it? Or is it something, hey, that's important that we need to start looking at and scoping? Or is it, yeah, it's a nice to have for longer term? Or, hey, I'm not even considering that until you're convincing me, hopefully today. So go ahead and vote on, how critical is it for you to have agentic AI operations in your day-to-day network capabilities? So get those votes in. And as you're finishing up those votes, where I want to go to a little bit here is what we can do as a little bonus here. And as I probably expected, the results, most of you, over 50%, are looking at AIOps as something important that you need to be looking at in the near future. So that's great to hear. And what I want to talk about next is a little bonus here on something new we are bringing for how do we leverage these great capabilities that we just saw. But say you have an existing data center already deployed, you have your own management tools, whether homegrown or leveraging Ansible or some kind of automation framework with Python that you have. But you're like, hey, that DCA stuff and the predictions and agentic troubleshooting, that was really cool. Well, I want to use that for my existing fabric that I have already deployed. Well, good news is we have an option for that available now. And so how that looks and how it works is, start with an existing fabric. Hopefully you have that already, and you're interested in leveraging AI ops. And so what we can do is, Apstra has a new deployment model. So we talked a lot about designing, building, all of that with your Apstra design, but what we have is a new design element where we can run Apstra in a telemetry only mode. What that means is you keep your existing configuration management and tools and workflows, whether it's manual, Python, Ansible, some other tool that you have. But Apstra can then go in and collect the rich telemetry that we saw and get the right data and be able to provide that graph database as a basis on the right data. And then we can then connect that to data center assurance to provide all the same AI ops capabilities that we saw. So what this looks like, very similar to that picture we were looking at in the beginning, but at the bottom, Apstra is not designing, deploying, and operating your day-to-day configuration. It is only running in telemetry only collector to be able to collect the right telemetry and flow data as well. So all that flow data we get, and then it can send that securely to data center assurance, where we can get all of those supercharged AI ops insights and recommendations and predictions and agentic root cause troubleshooting. So we can get everything we just saw that was part of data center assurance with this on an existing fabric. And so what that gives you is you keep your existing configuration process. You don't have to change that today. You get all of the great telemetry collection and flow data for app insights, and then all of the data center assurance, AI ops and assurance predictions and agentic capabilities. And you don't get the Apstra configuration management. Hopefully that's obvious because you're keeping your existing configuration management and Apstra is running only in telemetry only mode. But it's a great use case for those of you that are looking at, hey, agentic AOps is key and something we need to start looking at, but I already have existing data centers. I'm not looking at deploying new ones or refreshing things, but I want to get those agentic AOps capabilities now. And this is what you can do available today. So if you're looking for that, we'll talk a little bit here in some closing on how you can get some more information on that here in just a second. But I want to spend a little bit of time on integrations. So as I mentioned in the beginning, data center is more than just networking. Even though it's being part of the networking group, we like to think networking is the most important. It is serving the applications and workloads you are running. And so integrations are key, and we've rapidly accelerated this as being now part of HPE in a much larger and combined company. And so things like GreenLake, or if you haven't heard of GreenLake, it's a unified cloud service for providing managed private cloud offerings. We've integrated our data center assurance in there to be able to provide a complete stack solution. We've also in that theme integrated with Apstra, which is HP's tool for full stack cross-domain observability, hence the name Apstra Observability. And what we can do is be able to provide our networking stack into OpsRamp for a complete view across servers, storage, and now networking. And also in that domain, we've looked at integrations with HP's Compute Ops Management, or COM, which is our server management solution. So this is specific observability for our servers, but we've integrated into COM to be able to provide information on what's going on in the network to be able to help prevent that swivel chair types of experience I was talking about. So that way we can be able to provide a seamless experience on what is going on in your workloads and servers to how is that in your network. And speaking of workloads, we have integrations already with things like VMware and Nutanix and OpenShift, but we've recently launched a new integration with Morpheus. And what we call this integration is network follows the workload. And what I mean by that is what we can do is there's a plugin in Morpheus that tracks and sees when you add new virtual networks and new workloads to be able to automatically push the associated networking configuration via the Apstra APIs to the network. So when you add a new workload and it adds a new virtual network in Morpheus, you don't have to then go add that in addition manually on the data center networking side. The plugin automatically pushes the right new virtual network and attaches it to the right leaf devices that are connected to the servers where those workloads are located. So it automates the network configuration and keeps it in line with the workloads. Hence the name, the network follows the workload. And additional integrations we've also brought is with things like ServiceNow and our SRX firewalls. And so I'm guessing a lot of you use ServiceNow. It's still the industry leader in IT support and tickets. But what we've done with ServiceNow is provided an integration to Apstra to be able to get things like configuration information. So that way you know exactly what inventory you have from things like switches to IP addresses to be able to have an inventory report in ServiceNow. To also, when Apstra detects intended deviations from your intended design with the anomaly framework with the intent-based analytics, we can be able to automatically update and create tickets in ServiceNow so that way they can be tracked and properly processed. And then for SRX configuration, this is another area where we see a lot of swivel chair types of experiences where there's a security team and a network team. And one of the advantages of the SRX is it can participate in an EVPN VXLAN network fabric, which is great, except when you have to ask your security admin to be able to understand EVPN VXLAN configuration. So where this integration helps is similar to some of the ones we talked about with things like Morpheus, but it helps keep the SRX in sync and in line with the network configuration. So if there's new interfaces, new virtual networks that have been added, they can be added to the SRX. So what we're doing here is looking for updates to the Apstra configuration that we can then pull that and automatically update the SRX network configuration. Now, this isn't updating the security policies. This is only looking at the network configuration. Security policy management still stays with security director where it handles that the best, but we can be able to make sure that the networking side stays in sync. And then finally, from an integration perspective, if you're looking at automating the automation or looking at how do you bring a network DevOps experience, we have Terraform providers, Ansible collections, and Python SDKs on top of all this, where you can look at bringing true network DevOps experiences into your workloads and automate all of that. So I'm going to get towards the end here and look at what and where are we going in the future with both Apstra Data Center Director and Mist Data Center Assurance. So starting with Apstra Data Center Director, our latest release that we have is 6.1 and 6.1.2 to be specific on the version that is the latest available for users like yourself. And we've done a lot of improvements in there. If you haven't seen the release notes on there, there's a lot of great new things from improving the dashboards of anomalies to new control plane probes to IPv6 and FIP support to allowing you to group and combine different devices together for NOS upgrades, to provide reboot options for the switches. Lots of great, cool, exciting things. What we're actively working on is a release for 6.2. And this is coming out here in the next couple of months, where we're going to have some additional improvements for scale and performance, as well as bring a Junos on-box agent for continued improvements for scaling, to able to support deploying Apstra on Morpheus. And then a key one that we're building is for L2 multi-tenancy. So this is being able to have things like overlapping VLANs. This is really critical if you're a service provider or operate like a service provider and you need to have overlapping VLANs for your tenants. Now, where we're going in the future is next year we're going to be working on a release called 6.3 for the first half of the year, where we're going to be focusing on some new innovations for running and operating AI data centers. So if you're looking at how do I host and operate an AI data center for whether it's training or inference, we're looking at new designs and industry innovations and things like multi-planar designs, where GPUs are connected to multiple fabrics, to multi-tenancy for offering things like GPU as a service, to be able to segregate and maximize those GPU costs to multiple different users and tenants. We're also working on expanding monitoring we can do for things like interface and QStats and validations for data center interconnects. Because if you have one data center, you're going to have multiple. And then there's also improvements we're looking at from a security side on how do we beef up security for things like API and device authentication, which is today based on user password, to look at certificate-based authentication. And then an exciting one we're looking at and working towards is how can we provide a hardware appliance model. So today Apstra ships as an OVA or associated image, but we want to look at how do we provide an appliance model for users that want to have a plug and play and operate and not have to go worry about getting virtual space to run management applications like Apstra. Now, getting into data center assurance, there's a lot of work we're doing around getting to that self-driving vision that we talked about. Now, we saw some of the features that already released, things like Marvis Minis and the predictions. And then where we're working at is turning and taking those predictions into marvelous actions to continuously improving our prediction models, to additional root cause analysis use cases for switch and app issues, to later this year, next year, on how do we get into actual self-driving automated actions for things like interface flaps and bad cabling and optics problems, to application issues, and how do we do things like automatically do packet captures when things happen, or tag critical resources, or even looking at leveraging agentic AI for things like fabric designers for when you're deploying and designing new fabrics to get that even faster. Or we're working on an integration with Juniper Support Insights to get things like vulnerabilities and CVEs insights as security becomes more and more critical these days. So a lot of great innovations and ideas we're bringing in the AIOps space to get to that self-driving and assurance types of level. So we're getting towards the end, and I have a couple of call to actions to wrap up before we see if there's any open questions that we weren't able to address on the chat that we want to bring up live. But the first one I want to bring for call to action is if you're an existing Apstra customer, I think we saw over 60% of the users here today are already using Apstra. But if you haven't used Flow or Data Center Assurance, there is availability for free trials for those that you can reach out to us. And so whether you're in Europe or Americas, there's different mailers you can reach out to us. And that's NFA underscore EMEA or NFA underscore Americas. If that's not clear, and NFA stands for Networks for AI, to help you remember that. So depending on whether you're in Europe or Americas, reach out to us if you want to try those and give that an experience. And then if you're already using Mist and you want to look at how do I leverage data center assurance for my existing data center and that telemetry only use case I mentioned, reach out to us as well, and we can help you get started on that journey of experiencing data center assurance. And then finally, as leading the PLM team, we'd love to get in touch with you, connect with you, and hear your additional feedback. And so if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us at apstra-plm-team@hp.com to get a hold of us and get in touch with us and build that relationship. So with that, I want to bring Nisha as our host back on to see if there's any good questions in the Q&A that we want to address live. So Nisha or team, any good questions that we want to bring up? So I see one in our internal chat, maybe talking about licensing. So good question on licensing. I'll take a minute to talk about that. So the exciting part we have is with our licensing structure, we offer all of the features in one license. So everything from Apstra to the Flow data collector to data center assurance, all of that is bundled into one license. So it's not add-on licensing or multiple tiers you got to get at. You get one license, you get it all. So that was a good question. Any other questions, team, that have come up in the chat that we should talk about more live? See a lot of answered questions.
More open question from Stefan. Will Aruba CX switching be supported in Apstra?
I expected that question. That's a good one. So there's not current plans. So the short answer is we haven't seen the ROI yet to invest in that. We're still willing to listen if you see of needs for that. Where we're working towards is for CX switches to continue to be managed by Fabric Composer, but looking at how do we bring Fabric Composer capabilities into Aruba Central. And the reason is we want to provide a seamless and common experience when you're using the CX switches across the campus and the data center. because that's where we see most deployments with the CX switches is when it's a common deployment across the campus and data center. And so by bringing the Fabric Composer capabilities into Central, we can provide Central as the key management for the entire CX portfolio. So with that, I think we're at the top of the hour. So we will happily follow up. As I said, reach out to us if you have additional questions, whether it's at the PLM mailer or reach out to the different region mailers if you want to get a hold of us and have additional questions or want to get started in trying some of these new capabilities. Please reach out to us. So with that, Nisha, I'll let you wrap it up for today and close out the session.
Thank you, Kyle. And thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate all the engagement, all the questions. Hope you found this session valuable. We request you to fill out a post-webinar survey, which we'll be sending out to you. Your feedback is very valuable to us. It will help us, shape our future webinars. We would love to hear what topics matter to you the most so that we can build content around it and help, supporting our customers in the best way possible. Please know that an email will be sent out with the replay of this webinar and all of the relevant resources that Kyle was presenting during the presentation today. With that, thank you again for your time, Kyle, and thank you everybody who was able to attend today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, team. I really appreciate everybody joining.